Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy that you're here. My name is Katie. If we haven't met each other before, really, I'm so grateful that you signed up because this allows me to do what I love. So I'm the founder of the business Sort of Spiritual. I work with successful women who feel like their goals haven't quite aligned with them yet. So I use human design as well as other modalities like NLP, EFT, hypnosis, and we really work on aligning with yourself, releasing resistance, attracting more success, and not burning out or selling out. So that's a little bit about me. And for the woo-woo introduction, I'm a 2/4 emotional manifester. My incarnation cross is the right angle cross of rulership for anyone who's interested. I have a Gemini sun, an Aries moon, and a Virgo rising. So I like to joke that I have like chaos inside, but I have it looking like I have it put together with the Virgo rising. My conscious sun is in gate 45 in human design. And so what that means is I'm really here to share resources with my people. I think there's some misunderstanding about the gate because it's often called the king or the queen, and it's really not about ruling. It's about sharing resources. At least that's what I think. So I'm grateful that you are my people for the day and that you're here to allow me to share my resources with you. And another cool part of my chart in terms of my gifts is my Jupiter is in gate 23 and gate 3. And if you don't know what this means, that's okay. But essentially it means that my gift is clearly communicating transformational knowledge, awareness, and new ways of thinking. So whenever people tell me that I make human design easy, which is probably the #1 compliment I get, so hopefully you'll experience that today. I know that I'm in the high vibes of Jupiter's blessings, and I'm really grateful for that. So I don't think I'm going to be able to have my notes present with me. They don't seem to be showing up on the iPad, but that's okay. I have so much information in my brain. I have no doubt that I'll cover everything. So a little bit of housekeeping just before we dive into things. I will be recording this. I haven't started yet, I don't think. Let me just make sure. Oh, welcome to the new people joining. Hello to the new people. We're just about to get started. So am I recording it? Yes, okay, I am. I'll cut it off for a little bit just so let me show the speaker. Let me just mute that, I guess. So your video shouldn't be in here, but just some housekeeping. The class is being recorded. So if you do ask a question or unmute yourself or have your camera on or something, you may be on the recording, so just be aware of that. I'm going to use words like good and bad regarding emotions because that's generally how we perceive them, but it's not the truth. So I just kind of want to be clear about that. And lastly, I'm not a doctor. None of this information is intended to be medical advice. This is just really purely learning and learning things from a human design perspective when it comes to emotions. So let me know if that sounds good. And yeah, I'm excited to share this all with you. So what is human design? For those of you that are new to human design or want a refresher, it's a system really for knowing yourself. It's based off of astrology, the chakra system, the I Ching, which is an ancient Chinese divination system, as well as others like Kabbalah and more modern systems. It's calculated from your birth time, date, and location, and it gives you a map really of who you're designed to be, how to move through life with the most ease, and how you energetically interact with the world. As well as a big part of the focus of this class is going to be how to make correct decisions for yourself, which is your authority. So let me know if that all sounds good. I'm going to do a quick body graph overview. I'm not going to go through all the parts, but just the ones I'm going to be talking about today. So the gates, when you're looking at the body graph, all of these numbers on the gates on the actual body graph will always stay in the same place, but whether they're defined or not will change. And then if you look where I have this blue highlight, those are also gates, and those are the parts that change based on your unique design. Defined gates, so I have them just highlighted here as well. So any of the gates that are colored in are considered to be defined. When two gates meet, they're channels, and those energize the centers, which are the shapes. So like I said, all of these shapes here, they're the centers. And we have either defined centers, which is when they're colored in. We have undefined centers, which is when they are white, but they have active gates or gates that are defined. And then we have open centers, which don't have any gate activations on them. For the most part, open and undefined centers are pretty similar. So if I say open and undefined, I'm probably going to use those terms interchangeably, especially because I can talk quickly sometimes, and saying open and defined is more clear than defined and undefined. So the emotional solar plexus, what we're all here for. It has been said in the definitive book of human design that this is the most impactful center of our current generation, or our current time in humanity, let's say, maybe more beyond generation. So we are going to dive all into that. The emotional solar plexus, so it's this little triangle here on the right-hand side of your chart. My teacher likes to say that it's the energy that makes us human. And let me just check. Okay, good. Just want to make sure everyone's in the class. So it's the energy that makes us human, and it is the center for the energy of romance, poetry, creativity, music, new human experiences, sex, sexuality, seduction, war, contracts, marriage, divinity, spirit, abundance. There's so much in this center. And if you notice that all of these things really are human experiences, it would be really freaking cute if animals were writing poetry and doing art and whatnot, but they don't have generally the same relation to these energies or the experience of these energies, you know, divinity, music. I know there's a few little exceptions and cute stories here and there, but for the most part, these are human experiences. And the themes of the emotional solar plexus that I've kind of distilled are really that our emotional wellness affects our physical wellness. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, that we're meant to move towards pleasure. So when you're looking at the body graph as the solar plexus center in the chakra world of things, so I'm not sure if you guys are aware of the chakras. So the solar plexus split into two, and that created the spleen and the emotional solar plexus in the human design system. The spleen is really about moving away from fear, keeping ourselves alive, where the emotional solar plexus is about moving towards pleasure. So that's one of the main themes, I would say, of the solar plexus, but it in no way means that we are going to be experiencing pleasure all the time. About 50% of us have emotional definition, which means also that it's our authority. And it means that we broadcast emotions, and then about 50% of us take it in and amplify emotions. So if you have this open, that would be you. Emotions operate in waves. They're not meant to be steady and even all the time. And we're also not meant to be the wave. We're here to observe it and wait for clarity over time. So these are kind of the themes of the emotional solar plexus. Some basic things about the emotional solar plexus. It is a motor. It's also an awareness center. So in human design, there's different types of centers. We have 4 motors in the body, and the emotional solar plexus is a motor, although it is an unreliable one, meaning that it's not a consistent source of energy like the sacral is, for example. So it is a motor, and we'll get into that a little bit more. It is always the authority if it's defined in the chart. So if you have this colored in, it is your authority. Even if you have a sacral, even if you have the spleen, doesn't matter. It's always the authority. It is like the top of the hierarchy when it comes to authorities. And it has 3 different waves. So we'll get into that shortly. The energies of the solar plexus are the same thing as the gates, and they again kind of help us to understand a little bit of the basics of the solar plexus. So we have, oops, sorry, we skipped ahead there. The gate 36, which is the gate of crisis. And really this gate isn't as, I don't know, dramatic as it sounds. I also like to call it the gate of boredom, or the gate of the rabbit hole, because it's something that likes to jump into the next new thing, the next new thing, the next new thing. It gets bored. And when you are constantly doing that without waiting, you create crisis. We also have openness, which is really about sharing your emotions, being open, having that grace and charm. And it's something that I find, not that other channels or gates don't have this, but I often find with this one that people are very emotional about anything. Like, it's something where you can really be moved to tears about anything all the time. So let me know in the chat if you're someone who experiences this. I'm such an emotional person, and I think it's like so funny. I don't know if you guys watched Some Good News, that like YouTube show that was on right kind of when the pandemic started. And I bawled my eyes out at every single one of those episodes. I'm sure other people did as well. But this energy in the emotional solar plexus is really about being moved, right? Being so touched. Friendship is gate 37, so that's fairly obvious. Friendship, wanting to create community. Friction is gate 6. And friction, or gate 6, is really one of the aura busting energies. So it really like penetrates and gets in there. And it can be really uncomfortable, but it is an initiating source of intimacy and building intimacy and allowing that sort of heat to build. Principles is 49. This gate goes by some other names as well. Sometimes people refer to it as the divorce gate, and more so because it's very black and white. It has principles, and if you cross those principles, that's it, you're done. Sometimes there's also a fair amount of revolution in this energy. 55 is called the gate of spirit. Sometimes it's called the gate of abundance, but it's really this idea of connection to source, connection to abundance. And then 30 is all about desire, which is pretty self-explanatory. The fears, I know we talk a lot in human design of the fears of the spleen, but we also have fears of the solar plexus. So 36 also has a fear of inadequacy. 22 is a fear of silence. 37 has a fear of tradition. And I find this one really interesting because whenever I do readings for people that have this, and I explain this to them, I'm like, you know, you're probably someone who doesn't want to get married, have children, be a stay-at-home mom. And they're like, no, 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 definitely not. And not that there's anything wrong with that. That's certainly a more traditional way of being, although we're transitioning out of that being as predominant. But I find it interesting because that really does hold true. 6 is a fear of intimacy. 49 is a fear of nature, and more so like the cycles of nature. It's not like you're afraid of the outdoors. 55 is a fear of emptiness, and 30 is a fear of the fates. So just some interesting things to kind of think about. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but again, the energies and the themes of the emotional solar plexus, like mating, reproduction, intimacy, war, conflict, sexuality, revolution, rejection, divorce, marriage, love, sensitivity, friendship, tradition, harmony, bargaining, agreements, surrender, grace, being social, moodiness, abundance, melancholy, faith, inadequacy, crisis, hunger for new things, passion, desire. There's so much here. And so with all these being such human experiences, I think it's really great to understand them. So I appreciate you all being here. So when we're looking at the channels of the emotional solar plexus, they again are going to put together a little bit more of the picture. And we'll talk about these a little bit more in depth when we're looking at the waves. But the channels are, again, more energies that come from the center. So we have the channel of mating, the channel of synthesis, the channel of community, of emoting, of openness, of recognition, and transitoriness. So these are all energies coming off of the emotional solar plexus. Feel free to take screenshots or something if you want to, if that makes it easier for you. Excuse me. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the center and whether it is defined, undefined, or open. So if it's defined, it means that it is colored in. When this is the case, it is automatically your authority. You have an emotional wave and your emotions are meant to go up and down. All emotions are meant to go up and down, but especially with the center. You're not meant to be spontaneous. So when you don't wait for clarity, you can create some chaos and confusion in your life. And we'll definitely touch on this when we go really into the authority, because we certainly live in a world where quick decisions are prized, generally speaking. I can't remember which business book it is, but there's some book that talks about like making quick decisions, or like successful people make decisions quickly and change their minds slowly. And that's really not the case for 50% of humanity. So it's helpful to know that and to give people the time they need. So it's really important for you to build an awareness of your wave, which we're going to talk more about. You broadcast emotions, so understanding that. And different gates will do this a little bit differently or more strongly, but you do broadcast emotions. So you need to be aware of that when you're in a space with people. And I'm not saying you always need to be high vibe or feeling good, because that is certainly not the case, but it's something to be aware of and be responsible for, that other people are going to pick up on your emotions a lot more and potentially make them bigger. So we'll get into that. Learning helpful ways for you to channel and process your emotions we'll talk about, And your energy and your drive can really go up or down based on your emotions. So using the creative surges when you can, and then resting when the energy is not there. If it is undefined, so the center is more like this, it is white in the center and you have a couple of gates, or a minimum of one, but you could have all of them technically, off the side. So when you have the center undefined, you really are an empath, and you take in emotions and you amplify them. So you might feel that you're actually more emotional than emotional people. Sometimes people are like, I don't know what you're talking about. It says I don't have emotional energy, but like, man, I'm so emotional, and I get it. And that's because you do amplify emotions. But the idea being with this is that you amplify emotions from people and even the collective, I would say, around you. It's not yourself. So really learning to differentiate those. It's important for you also to have a practice to be able to release emotions. Clearing out energy that isn't yours. I kind of liken it sometimes to like when you're holding a lot of emotions inside of you, if you're undefined or open, that it's almost like you ate something bad, or like you drank too much alcohol and your body needs to get it out. It's not good for you. It's not yours. It's not meant to be in you, right? And so it's this idea of like allowing yourself to get out the food poisoning or to get out the alcohol or something like that, because containing it inside is not healthy for you. So another way of looking at it is to be the strainer and not the sponge. So if you imagine like a kitchen strainer or like a colander or a sieve, whatever you want to call it, when you're running water through it, if water are emotions, it goes through the strainer. And so sure, as the strainer, you're going to feel the emotions going through you. You'll experience them, but you don't need to attach to them. So that's the sponge. If you're the sponge, you're soaking up all of the emotions, and that's really not ideal. It's not healthy for you. So allowing yourself to feel them, absolutely, but we don't need to attach to emotions and hold on to them when they're not our own. I used to work for a coach, and she had this saying that I think is, helpful here. So if imagine you're on a boat and someone is seasick, right? And they're throwing up over the side of the boat. Sorry, this is gross, I know. So if you're the sponge, if you're being the strainer, that's a better way to deal with things, let's say. So you can go over and you can comfort them. You can tell that they're not feeling well. Maybe you're going to hold their hair back or pat their back or something. If you're the sponge, you're going to go beside them and throw up as well. And that's not helpful, right? It doesn't feel good to you. It probably doesn't feel good to them. And so this whole idea of not holding on to things and taking them on as your own, but allowing yourself to experience them and feel them without attaching. There is a tendency with the center when it's undefined to people please, because you can feel how people are feeling and you don't want to feel bad feelings, generally speaking. So you can people please so that you don't upset people or disappoint them or make them angry, because you don't want to deal with that. And there are a lot of other things in the chart that can lead to this behavior. So if you're emotionally defined and you're like, oh man, Katie, I have like a real thing with people pleasing, no worries. This isn't the only thing. Well, I mean, not no worries. It's something to definitely learn about and deal with, but it does show up other places in the chart. It's not solely here. There is also a tendency to, sorry, let me just read this comment. So you aren't an empath if your emotional center is defined. I find this so interesting. So Jamie, this is really interesting about being empathic, because I absolutely understand what you're saying. In human design terms, you are empathic if you're open or undefined. However, we have so many other centers and channels and gates that we can experience people. And so one of the things, like if your G center, that diamond that's in the middle of your chart, is open, you can really take on people's identities. If your head or your mind are open, you can take in people's thoughts. If your root center is open, you can take in people's stress. If your spleen is open, you can take in people's fears. So there's a lot of places that you can take in feelings. And again, this is just one system and one way of looking at it. But you have all of these other gates and channels off of the center. So you can certainly kind of plug into these energies. Yeah. So if your mind and your head are open, that's definitely something that you can be picking up. Megan, I'm emotional empath and emotionally defined. The difference is I can generally tell what emotions are mine. Yeah, that's a really good point, Megan, is being able to differentiate between emotions that are yours and other people's. So back to the undefined centers. So the tendency to people please, or there can be a tendency to create drama, especially if you grew up in an environment where there was a lot of tumultuous emotions or a lot of drama. You might crave that sometimes, and you're the person who might kind of like stir the pot when you're a little bit bored to create some interest, right? So it can go both ways. It's not just that you're a people pleaser if you have this open. It's not your job to manage anyone else's emotions. This is often a job that the undefined center takes on. And giving yourself space from the source of strong emotions is really helpful. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Energy clearing practices, which we'll also get into, are really important when you have this, just to allow yourself to get the energy that isn't yours out of your system. And this is a meme that I thought was really funny about the open solar plexus. And it says, like, when someone starts to cry and they're like, I got you some toothpaste. And it's just, you know, not really true. There are a lot of open people who do understand emotions, who are incredibly wise with emotions. But when your solar plexus is completely open, meaning you have no gate activations, it's totally white, it can feel really confusing and overwhelming to be around strong emotions, because you don't have any gates to filter the emotional energy. So you don't really understand how to experience them. And honestly, I feel like a lot of humanity hasn't really been taught how to be with emotions. So even if we're well versed in our own emotions, we may really not know how to be there for others, and can produce that, like, here's your toothpaste quality. So with the center, it can feel difficult to clearly understand or identify with the emotions of others, and you might feel like something is wrong with you emotionally, when that's not the case at all. You really have the ability to understand the emotional waves purely, without any kind of tinted lens of your own to see it through. And there's no conditions of your own getting in the way. So there's always massive wisdom in the open centers when you allow yourself to release the energy that's not theirs, that's not yours, sorry. Okay, so yes, the wisdom of the open or undefined emotional solar plexus. You're really here to be empathic. And like I said, there are other centers that create the experience of empathy. So it doesn't mean you're not empathic, but it's a different kind of empathy. You can really see and understand emotional wellness in others, and you're able to see and reflect the emotions of others back to them when they may not be allowing themselves to fully feel their own emotions. So it can be a cool experience as someone who's defined, to be around someone and allow them to reflect back to you what they're hearing, what they're seeing, because sometimes you can get so wrapped up or so in the wave of your own, it's hard to really understand what you're feeling. And having someone else be able to have space for that and reflect that can be really helpful. You are truly unlimited in the emotions that you can experience from others, which I think is so beautiful. And the not self-talk. So again, for those who are fairly new to human design, not self-talk is when you are in the low expression, let's say, of your design, when you're not really in alignment. And so when you're in the not self of the center, it's not how you are going to operate in like the highest degree. So the not self, things like this is what your not self would be saying, or how to identify if you're in the not self. And this is not a fully complete list, but the idea of, I don't want any confrontation. Let's do this instead because I know there's not going to be any problems here. Don't say that. Don't do that. It might upset someone. It could look like spending ages crafting a text or an email, or rehearsing a conversation in your head to rid it of any potential upset or confrontation. This idea of like, maybe if I'm really nice and smile at everyone, they'll all be happy and they'll like me. The idea of, what if I'm disappointed or rejected? Why bother? What if it doesn't work? What if it upsets someone? What if I hurt someone's feelings? And like, is the truth really important? Maybe it's more important that we just keep everyone happy. So these are all important things to keep an eye out for. And even if you are emotionally defined, I know I certainly have experienced these as well. So I don't believe that not self-talk is only for the open or the undefined centers, but it's a more common problem. The not self of the defined center is usually, and like I said, this isn't an always thing, the feeling of I'm too emotional, I'm too sensitive, I'm too crazy, I'm too much. So often the not self is that like you're too something. So let me know if you guys have experienced or have been told in your life even that you're too emotional or you're too sensitive. I disagree with anyone who has ever told you that, but yeah, but I certainly got a lot of that growing up. Yeah, yeah, you guys are relating to the not self-talk, the defined. Yeah, too sensitive. I know. It's, you know, like I said, I disagree with everyone who's ever said that. I believe that the emotions, yeah, are very misunderstood. Yeah, I know. I've got that from parents, from friends, from teachers, from my ex-husband. It was nonstop. So own all of yourself. I think that's one of the most important things that we can do. And the emotional solar plexus is a really big part of that. So I want to talk briefly about the 2027 evolution. So, okay, Michelle, yeah, I feel you there. Yeah, there's so much shaming around emotions. And so one of the things, so on this evolution thing, the 2027 evolution, the last time, or really when we started the evolution was in, I think, 1781. And that's when we transitioned from a 7-centered beings to the traditional chakra system to the 9 centers. And with that, the emotional solar plexus really became a big part. And in 2027, we're going to complete this evolution. And really, it's not going to be like, you know, countdown at midnight and all of a sudden we're all evolved on January 1st, 2027. But it's really when we're going to begin the completion of this evolution, and the idea being that the emotional wave will be fixed. And I use the term fixed as in held in place, not fixed as in there's something wrong with the wave. However, there is a lot of tumultuousness that the emotional wave creates. For example, when you make a decision that's not aligned with your emotional wave and you don't respect your authority, 2 days later, you're like, oh, it was a stupid decision. Why did I make that? That's kind of a big reason why we have contracts, so we can hold people to what they said. And that's part of the energy of the emotional center, because, you know, with half of us being emotional and half of us not, half of us can really, I mean, not quite half, but a lot of us can give those really quick answers and commit to something and see it through, and that's that. The emotional center is not that way. It needs time. It needs to feel the highs and lows. It needs to go through the experience before it can be certain. And even then, it's not going to be certain like the sacral is going to be certain, for example. So with this 2027 evolution, the emotional solar plexus will be changing, and it will hopefully create a lot more peace in our world, without the need for war, without the need for boundaries on land, and a lot of this like emotional stuff that we base a lot of our world problems around. So it's interesting to see where we're going. If you guys are interested in that, let me know, and maybe I'll share some more about that another time. But just an idea of where we're heading in terms of the emotional center. And just while we're on it, something that I find really fascinating that Human Design speaks about is autism. And so part of what is happening in the 2027 evolution is a new circuit that's called the Autic circuit. And so allegedly the children or the people that have autism now, they've actually evolved already. And so they have a different relation to emotions than we do. And it's not that they, you know, are deficient or something's wrong with them. They're actually more evolved than us. And they can connect in a different way that doesn't use the emotional wave how we do. So I find that really fascinating. I'm not sure if anyone else does, but I thought that was really cool to learn a little bit about that. Yeah, yeah. Megan agrees. Cool. So the emotional wave. This is so, so, so important. And we're going to spend a decent amount of time talking about this. So before we get into the emotional wave, I want to touch on just briefly circuitry. So in human design, all of the channels are part of different circuits. And in terms of circuits, we have the collective, which is, you know, institutions, it's government, it's healthcare, it's school systems, it's big energy in terms of a lot of people. It's not something that can easily be changed. It takes a lot of time. So we have this one on the left-hand side, the collective. So you can see the gates highlighted there, or the channels. We have tribal, which is probably what it sounds like in terms of your close tribe, your close community, your neighbors, your family. And the tribal stuff is really like the people that are going to go to war for something, right? It's like you wronged me, you did this against someone in my tribe, I want revenge. It's time for revolution. It's this kind of energy. And so that's going to be changing in the next evolution, which I think is hopeful. And then we have the individual circuit, which is all about me and you, but it's all about the individual, right? It doesn't care really about other people. And not that it doesn't care, like it wants to hurt them, but it just doesn't care. It just has no interest. It's just really all about yourself and your own evolution, because that's how evolution happens. It's at the individual level. And I have the integration circuit here. It's not actually a circuit, but the integration channels, just for the full picture. But that doesn't actually play into the emotional stuff, so we're not going to go into that today. So this is the circuitry in these 3 levels. And so you'll see that the emotional waves fall into the collective, tribal, and individual circuits. And so understanding, if you have your charts here, check out what your wave is, because different waves have different qualities, and understanding the quality of your wave is really helpful. So if you're looking at the tribal, it's these 3 green ones kind of in the middle. We have the 59-6, which is the initiating wave, all about reproduction. The 1949, which is often called the channel of love and marriage, although it's not necessarily to do with love and marriage. And then 3740, which is about bargains. And then we have the individual. And so just if you can even see the themes there a little bit about tribal, you know, reproduction, so the tribe surviving, love and marriage, agreement so that the tribe can survive, bargaining, again, agreements between tribes, agreements within the tribe. And then we have individual, which is emoting, 3955, and then the 1222, which is openness. So again, that's very individual. It doesn't really care about the tribe. It doesn't really care about others. It's just here to emote. It's just here to share its feelings. It's just here to be open and have experiences. And then the collective is 4130, and which is fantasy and desire. So kind of seeing the bigger picture for the collective. And then 3635, which is transitoriness, which is a lot about boredom and change and new human experiences. Kathy, if you are emotionally defined, you have to have one of these. That's, yeah, for your emotional center to be defined, you'll have to have one of these channels. So the emotional waves, like I said, the 59-6 is the initiating wave. So, oh, okay, sorry, Kathy, you're not defined. Perfect. That makes sense then. You wouldn't have any of those if you are not defined. If you have the initiating wave, it starts in gate 6 and it moves towards 56. And there is passion here, there's desire, and it's really what's created to penetrate auras and break down barriers and to create intimate bonds. And so 59 is the gate of sexuality, 6 is friction. And so it's the one that kind of creates the friction to lead towards sexuality that will ultimately create babies for the tribe. And again, this is a very like primitive way of looking at sexuality. It's certainly not the whole picture of it. 59-6, yeah, it's a really cool energy to have. And I have 55 and 6. Yeah, so Maria, if you have a full channel, if you're emotionally defined, you will have one of the channels. And you can also have multiples of the gates. So for you to have 55 defined and for you to have 6 defined, perfectly normal. You just don't have the full channel. So you're not likely to experience that wave consistently. Yeah. So the initiating wave of 59-6, this wave generally feels stable and needs another person to bring it to life. So we have some waves that are really emotional, and then we have some waves that are kind of like meh, and really need the other person to activate them a little bit. If the channel doesn't have a full line, it's not a channel, it's a gate. So hopefully that helps, Jamie. So the emotional waves for the tribal wave. So the 59-6 is part of the tribal, so is 1949, and so is 3740. And this wave plays out in my relationship all the time, let me tell you. So this wave incrementally like ratchets up until it explodes. And so the example that's often given is one of a relationship where you know, I'll use my real life as an example, where it's like, I'll do something that's not really that big of a deal, but kind of like, it like irks my boyfriend a little bit. And so he ratchets up a little bit. But it's not a big deal. So he doesn't say anything because like, whatever, it doesn't matter. And then I do something else and it just like ratchets up a little bit, and then something else and like ratchets up a little bit. And it's not, you know, each little thing is barely even worth addressing because it's just not a big deal until all of a sudden you like ratchet into the very brim and you're exploding. So I don't know if you guys remember when we could go to water parks? Just kidding, we'll be able to go back one day. But to me, like, this is very like, you know how they have those buckets in water park in like the splash pads for kids, and it's like this massive bucket full of water, and it fills up like a little more, a little more, a little more, a little more, and then it just tips and like floods everything. That to me is what this wave is like. So when you're experiencing this, something that's really important, or if you have one of these waves, is to notice when you're starting to climb up that ladder, right? Before you just explode on everybody. And I use the term explode sort of loosely because it doesn't mean you're gonna have like a rage fit or something, but it's just like something clicks and you're done. You can't deal with this. We need to have a conversation right now. This is driving me crazy. Whereas, you know, for a really long time, it was like, oh, it's nothing. Oh, it's nothing. Oh, it's nothing. Oh my God, I can't deal. So that's kind of what this wave is. And again, often with this wave, people don't feel it massively unless there's kind of issues in interpersonal relationships. Then there can be a lot of emotion. And with this, you want to be mindful of relationships that you engage in. So it can be better to sleep on decisions before you get involved with people instead of just like spontaneously going into things. And again, there's no judgment here on my part. I certainly have entered relationships rather quickly, but it's something to be aware of, that sleeping on it and giving yourself time is really helpful. Okay, I saw a hand raise. Oh, you didn't mean to. Okay, no problem. Okay, so the next emotional wave is the individual. And this emotional wave, like I said, it's individual. It doesn't care about others, and not in a mean way, just that it's like wrapped up in its own emotions. So it's very emotionally expressive. It's moody. There's melancholy here. There's passion here if the mood is right or if the energy is there. It can feel fairly even, and this is where I've been taught different things. So officially, Jovian, which is like the actual human design school, let's say, the source of human design, says that this wave is the least noticeable. It just kind of, and I'll have a diagram of the waves in a minute, but it kind of just goes along straight with like little ups and little downs. And I've also been taught by someone who's practiced human design for over 20 years and learned from Ra directly. Ra is the founder of human design, by the way, that this is the most extreme wave. So there's differences of opinion. And I have this wave myself. I have the 1222, and this is certainly something that I've experienced both of, where, you know, if things are good, then I'm just good. I'm kind of like just going along, maybe like a little up, a little down, but pretty even. And when things aren't good, it's like, man, the number of times I have Googled, like, am I bipolar, or like, what's wrong with me? Because it's just like, my emotions can swing so much. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, because that's something to work through with all those things. So like I said, officially you barely notice it. However, it's also been said to be the most extreme. So it's something to understand whether you have this, there's nothing wrong with you. Yeah. If you have the 3955 or the 2212, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. If someone else in your life has this and you find them difficult because of their emotions, there's nothing wrong with them. It's just really about learning how to be with that, how to create space, and how to use it really productively, because this is an energy center. It's a motor. So this is really useful energy, and it's about learning how to work with this. Yeah, Steph, really interesting. I know we've had a conversation a little bit about this before, and I have a lot of thoughts on this and bipolar, so we might get into that a little bit later. When Victoria, I'm also a Gemini, so yes, I feel that. When I'm down on the wave, or when this person is down on the wave, the individual wave, it needs time alone, and it also is a time to be like with your creative muse, to, you know, kind of indulge yourself, like allow yourself to be dark and moody and whatever. And that's okay. It's a really creative place to be. And another way to look at this is cycles of creativity, where when you're down on the wave, you have like this inner creativity. And when you're up on the wave, it's a more outer creativity. And so it's not bad. And we'll talk about this more, but the less you can judge it, the better. But I'll get into that towards the end. So like I said, the individual wave can question their emotional stability and feel really bipolar. Again, I'll say it, there's nothing wrong with you. And asking what's wrong with me, or if you're doing this to someone else, please, I would love if we could just stop asking the question, what's wrong with me, or what's wrong with you? Because when we ask questions, we get answers. So if we're asking ourselves, what's wrong with me, your brain is gonna find answers, and they're generally not nice ones. So when you focus on what's wrong with me, it tends to like drag you further down in the wave. And that's not where we want to go. Naturally being on the wave, perfect. But keeping your focus on the low part of it and dragging yourself down to the bottom of the ocean is really not our intention. So yeah, cyclical energy, it's going to go up and it's going to go down, and that's just what it is, right? There's no being happy all the time, every day. Like, just no. Step wave tattoo. Yes, I love it. Okay, your energy can go down when your mood is down. So that's something that's important to note. And it's something to be responsible for, because I don't ever want to tell people to feel good all the time, because that's just not a reality. And that's really not what you're here to do. But when your energy and your productivity, not that you have to be productive to have worthy value, anything like that, but you know, we like to be able to do things in life. It feels good to be able to move forward. Maybe we have a project we're really excited about, but our wave is low and we don't have any energy to do anything. I really feel this. Like, this was me pretty much all of June. So when your mood is down, your energy goes away, and it's really hard to do anything. And it's really frustrating for other people in your life, because they're like, man, can you just do this thing? Like, what the heck? You made a commitment, like you have to do this, and you literally just can't. And so learning how to work with your emotions, to process your emotions, and to create more high frequency emotions. And again, I want to be so clear, I am not saying like high vibes only, because we need to feel all of them. But there is a bit of a skill and a bit of a learning to be able to create more, so that you can have the energy. Because it really can be hard to do anything when the mood isn't right with this wave. Okay, the collective wave. So this is 4130 and 3635. This wave bottoms out when expectations or desires are not fulfilled. And so it can seem really dramatic, because it's like, everything's good, everything's good, everything's good, and then like crash, right? So releasing expectations and allowing yourself to participate in life for the experience instead of expected outcomes is really powerful for this wave. You know, I used to work in the hospitality industry. My career before human design was just that. I was in hotel sales. And like, the number one thing of hotel experience is managing expectations, and hopefully exceeding them, but managing expectations. Like, whenever there was any kind of a problem or whatever, that was just it, manage expectations. Because the better you can manage expectations, the less likely you're going to deal with a person who's just like off the wall, angry, losing their mind. And it's hard to deal with that in a professional environment. So there's a slow climb with this wave and a deep plummet. The themes are really about manifesting fantasy and desire. So it can be really like juicy and fun. And it's really important to wait, because these energies, when they're mixed with impulsivity, and it's really important for all the waves to wait, but especially this one, they really can be chaotic and self-destructive, just the way that these energies mix. So you want to make sure you're respecting your emotional wave. And I know we had a comment earlier that was saying, you know, you're having a little bit of difficulty with your relationship with your emotional wave, and I totally get it. We're going to get into that. So this is what the waves look like. This graphic is from the definitive book of human design. So it's on page 78 if you guys have it or want to have a look. So the emotional wave, the 59.6, is just kind of, you know, steady, slow climb. The tribal wave, like I was saying, it like ratchets up. So it kind of goes like up and then we're okay, and then up and then we're okay, and we're up and we're okay, and then like crash. The individual has the spikes, so the high highs and the low lows. And the collective goes up and up and up and up and up, and then the expectation isn't met and it bottoms out and then repeats the cycle. And what I didn't mention is that you can have more than one of these. So if you have more than one channel coming off of your solar plexus, you can have more than one wave, which means you're going to need to work a little bit harder to understand your wave, but that's okay. My human design teacher, when there's charts that have certain challenges in them, likes to say that you were a very eager student. On the day that they were like handing out assignments for human design charts, you decided to pick one that was like going to give you some extra learnings in this lifetime. So I like that perspective. So with the wave, energy flows where attention goes. I'm sure we've heard this saying before. And I mentioned this a little bit with the concept of asking what's wrong with me, is paying attention to the wave and not creating so much attachment to the low part of the wave. And this was something that I used to do and had a real difficulty with, I would say, is that whenever I was down on the wave, I was terrified. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be depressed forever. This is the end of things. I'm never going to be successful. Nothing's ever going to happen. Everything's awful. I'm never going to have friends. I'm never going to have this. I'm never going to whatever. And it was like very dramatic and very hard and very low. And the more I focused on that, the deeper I would go and the longer I would stay. And the longer I would stay, the more afraid I always get that I'm going to stay there for longer. And so it was this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. And so it's really important that, again, the energy flows where attention goes. So attaching to being low on the wave and making it wrong and bad, that's going to be hard because it's not wrong or bad. You're just low on the wave. It's like, to me, that's a really good indication to take a little bit of time off, go read a book, go watch some Netflix, go lie in bed and listen to sad music and cry, whatever. But it is going to come back up, just like waves in the ocean or any other cycle. Like, I'm sure you've noticed every winter, after winter, there's spring. It's never winter forever. And I'm not saying that winter is a bad thing. I'm just using an example. So understanding your wave and detaching meaning from being low on the wave. Does it feel good all the time? No, not necessarily, but it can be something that's a way for you to rest, to take care of yourself, to notice what's going on instead of just dragging yourself deeper and deeper and deeper. So it's really important to note that, because the less you attach meaning to anything, but the less you attach meaning to being low, generally the quicker you'll move out of being low. And at the same time, attaching a lot of meaning to being high on the wave or feeling good all the time, that creates more sort of trauma when you're not feeling that. We're meant to operate in contrast. We're not meant to feel good all the time. If we felt good all the time, we wouldn't understand what feeling good was, right? So contrast is okay. We're meant to operate this way. And you can do a lot of things to work on having a more enjoyable emotional experience, let's say, where maybe you're not down on the wave so often or so frequently or for so long or so dramatically, right? Like I said, with the individual wave or any of the waves, really, you can make the highs and lows less extreme. And I also appreciate a fuller range of emotions. So, there's a lot of nuances here. Okay, we have a question. One of my best friends is also emotionally defined, and together we have an alchemical channel. He has 36 and I have 35. Does he have the emotional side of this channel all the time and me only when I'm around him? Megan, sorry, can you remind me, are you emotionally open? Like, are you undefined? You just have one of the gates? Okay, so yeah, anyways, you're defined, okay. And he's also defined. Does he have this side of the channel all the time? So you have the 59.6. He's also emotionally defined. Okay, so you're both defined. Yeah, so if you're both defined, you create that channel together, essentially. So when you're around each other, you guys probably have a lot of fun, first of all. 36 and 35, I love that connection. But there can be a lot of like jumping into new experiences and just like having these experiences without maybe waiting out or respecting other things in the world. So it can be like, that's a really fun connection, I would say, to have with people, the 35, 36. But it would be something that you guys, yeah, you have a very emotional relationship. That doesn't surprise me. 36 is called the gate of crisis. And there can be a lot of chaos that is created when you jump into things and you don't respect the emotional authority. And it's harder to respect emotional authority when there's two of you involved, because now you have two waves that you're dealing with and working with. So yeah. Okay, so yes, this is pretty much what I just talked about. So releasing attachment to the wave. I settled that. Okay, let's move on. Emotions are not meant to be even and steady and always the same. There's nothing wrong with you for having up and downs. I like to just hammer that in again and again and again, because I know the opposite really has been indoctrinated in us, that we need to like sit down and be quiet and be happy and smile. And thank you for joining, Katrina. Yeah, if you guys need to, you know, jump off, that's fine. I totally understand. You don't need to say goodbye, although I do appreciate it when you do. So again, this idea that emotions are often told that they're bad and dangerous and we shouldn't experience them and something's wrong with you, you need to be medicated. And not saying that medication doesn't have its place, but I think we maybe rely on it a little bit too much. So have you ever tried to stop a wave in the ocean? Probably didn't go well, right? And it's the same kind of thing with your emotional wave. So understanding it and respecting it is really important, because you're not going to be able to stop it. This is probably going to go for about another half an hour, by the way. I see we're at 1 o'clock. I don't remember if I said how long the class was going to last, but just to manage expectations so you guys know. So if you have to jump off, no worries. So the motor. This is, again, a motor. So when your energy is going to depend on your emotions. So it's important to do the work to create good emotions. And I don't want to say only good emotions, but you want to be able to kind of raise your baseline frequency so that you're generally feeling good most of the time and that you generally have a lot of energy. I think most of us like to feel that way. It's also important to let yourself feel crappy when you feel crappy, but creating a higher level, like a baseline frequency, is really important, as this is a motor, so that you can have more access to this energy, especially for those of you like me who doesn't have a sacral, right? I cannot rely on the sacral to get me through. So I need to really work on my mood to have a sustainable, well, it's not gonna be sustainable, but to have a more frequent level of energy throughout my life. It is also creative energy. So when you feel the surge of creativity, you really wanna capture it. So whether you're writing things down or creating a voice note or sketching something out, capture that energy, because when it's gone, it's really difficult to recreate. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about if you have the creative energy of the solar plexus, where you're like, oh my God. And like, I do this all the time with writing things. And sometimes I'll go back and I'm like, who wrote that? Like, I guess it's me because it's on my phone, but okay, that's weird. And it's like, you know, it's something that would be really difficult to recreate. So it's important to capture it when it's there. And learning how to process your emotions, which we're going to get to. So the emotional authority, the basic information, which is what I was first taught when I got into human design. And I was like, I don't get it really. So hopefully we'll go deeper and this will make sense. So ask questions as we're going on if you need clarification. So the basic information, you have up and downs, right? You have the emotional wave. Ra, the founder of human design, says there is no truth in the now. You need to wait out your wave before making a decision. You cannot trust spontaneous decisions, and waiting will bring you clarity, although complete certainty is unlikely. So that's kind of the basic of what you're told about the emotional authority. And all of that's true, but I think there's so much more to be said about it to go a little bit deeper. So where did my little chat box go? It's hiding. So what I really recommend is becoming a surfer when it comes to your emotional authority. And what I mean by this, you know, I'm not exactly an expert on surfing, but I really enjoyed the movie Blue Crush when I was younger. But this idea of being a surfer, and surfers, really great surfers, understand the wave, right? They respect the wave, they respect the ocean. They know that they can't do anything about the wave. They know that they can't tame it or stop it or change it or whatever. So they learn the waves and they learn to respect them. And it's really the same for you. Understanding yourself is such a key to using your emotional authority well. So get to know your wave. One of the things I usually tell my clients to do is learning to identify where you're at on your wave. So on a scale, like there's a few different ways. Using a scale system, so like -10 is like the very bottom, the world is ending. And +10 is like literally the best feeling you've ever had in your life. And you can, keep a notepad on you, and whether you want to track it every hour for a couple of days, or you want to track it in the morning and the evening, or once a day, whatever. I also like to have a note in my phone, and you can use emojis, right? And like, this is how I'm feeling today. Like, this is my emoji face right now. There's also apps that you can use to track your mood. So those can all be useful when you're learning to identify your wave and learning the ups and downs. So those are all things I recommend. But get really clear on what feeling high feels like and what feeling low feels like. And I know that seems obvious, but I think we're often so unattached from it that it can be really helpful to build that clear understanding and like journal on it, write about it, but pay attention. And so for example, for myself, when I'm making decisions from a really high place on my wave, I notice that there's a lot of frantic energy, and it's this kind of like up here, like high, chaotic, oh my God, like I have to do this thing or it's gonna be the best thing ever, or like everything relies on this. So if I don't do this, then like nothing else is gonna happen. And like this, it has to be this. And it's frantic. It doesn't feel good. I mean, it doesn't feel bad because it's exciting, but it's frantic. And the low feels just like why bother? Like everything sucks, who cares? It doesn't matter, And so understanding both of those is really helpful, because noticing when you're in that space, you're like, okay, I'm not making any decisions right now because this is not a space for me to make decisions from, right? And you can really be clear about that because you know what it feels like. Another thing I always get clients to do is to reflect on past decisions. So, spend some time with your journal or your phone or whatever, and think about past decisions that you've made, ones that went well, ones that didn't go well. Did you make them spontaneously? Can you remember how you were feeling in the moment? Were you feeling rushed? Were you feeling pressured? Were you feeling forced? Were you feeling like it would be the end of the world, or that this decision would be your savior, right? Notice these things and reflect on how the decision turned out. Did you rush into a relationship? How'd that go? Did you accept a job right the second they offered it to you? How did that go? Did you, I don't know, go on someone's masterclass and they sold you something and you bought it immediately and it was a massive amount of money and you're like, oh my God, what the heck was I thinking? I've spent a lot of money doing that. I wish I had learned about my authority earlier in life, but that's okay. So another thing with your authority is to learn the difference of fear and no, because I'm going to talk a little bit about the red flags with the emotional authority, but you need to understand what fear feels like versus a no, because sometimes it can be a little bit confusing, but they are very different feelings. So again, build that awareness in yourself. This is work that you really have to do. I can't explain it to you what your fear is going to feel like. However, there will be a different feeling in your body. So building the relationship with your body, the relationship with your feelings is really helpful. And then also maintaining emotional well-being, which I'm going to chat about, is super crucial. So sometimes people ask me this, like, why do I have to wait, as if they're being punished or something by the human design gods for having an emotional authority? And you don't, this is always an experiment, but it might be worth waiting. It might be worth experimenting with, right? So I like to say that human design has a 30,000 foot view, or like not human design, but the world, the universe, whatever, has a 30,000 foot view. And you can only see like 200 meters in front of you. And for the next 200 meters, the decision you want to make right this second seems like a good decision. But if you waited, you might get more information that would change your decision. And so, for example, in June, there was a course that I was going to launch. I am still going to launch it. I just haven't yet. So there was a course that I was going to launch, and I was really excited about it. And I was like going to like get going and do all the things. And it was going to be a lot of work. And I was like, you know what? Let's be a good human design student, teacher, whatever, and wait, because if this is still the right thing, it's going to be okay. And the right decision is still going to be there for me tomorrow. And that night I got an email from, just an email list, whatever, from a podcast I hadn't listened to in a really long time. And it was a marketing podcast. And I just don't really care about that stuff so much anymore. And for whatever reason, I decided to go and listen to her podcast. And there happened to be an episode with some guy that I recognized. I was like, oh, okay, I'll listen to this. And oh my God, I'm so happy that I did, because that was the exact information I needed to completely change how I was going to go about launching this in my business. And in a way that was so much easier, so much more relaxed, was going to save me so much time. And so those are the things that waiting is helpful for, because the day before, I didn't know that this person was going to email me and I was going to go listen to her podcast and find something that actually made a difference. And you want to be careful that you're just not like jumping down rabbit holes, but it was new information that was presented that changed how I was going to do something. And it saved me a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money. So waiting can be a really good thing. Waiting can present you with new options, new opportunities, different perspectives. And so it's not like you have to wait because human design is mean and doesn't want you to do whatever you want right now. It's just that if you give yourself a little bit of time, you'll get a different download. You'll have a conversation with someone. Something else will come into your awareness that's going to change how you would make that decision. Do you have advice for those of us with open, undefined emotional centers? For example, how do we navigate being in? Yes. Beth, if I don't answer that by the end, let me know, because I think I'm going to talk about that. I'm pretty sure I have it in one of the future slides. And yeah, sometimes it takes days for the aha moment, for sure. I always say, at a very minimum, sleep on it for a decision. Give yourself the time to sleep on it, especially if you don't really feel particularly emotional about something. Sleep on it. Even earlier this year, I was looking at moving to this apartment. I live in Toronto. Apartments are very expensive for what you get. And there was one that was really big and it was such a good deal. And I was so ready to snap it up. And I was like, you know what? I don't have to make the decision right now. So let's just wait. And then the next day, as I was walking to the place, I was like, yeah, I really don't want to live here. Really don't like this neighborhood. Like, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel safe. It's like pretty dirty. It's like, yeah, just no. And so I'm like, man, thank God I didn't snap that up, because even if it is a good deal, like, I don't want to be in that energy all the time. That's not fun for me, especially with an open G center. My location is really important. Okay, so the emotional authority red flags, rationalizing. This is a big one, especially if you have gate 24, or even if you have the opposite of gate 24. Notice if you're rationalizing of why this decision is actually a good decision and why you should actually make this decision and why this would actually be a really good thing. And that's what I did a lot with that apartment, where I'm like, well, it's a really good deal and it's like not that far away from things. And even though the apartment itself is super ugly, I'd be able to paint it and I'd have room for this. And even though it looks over a dumpster, well, like, that's okay. I could, you rationalize things. And when you rationalize things, that to me is a really clear indication that I'm not using my emotional authority, because I'm trying to convince myself. So that's the second thing, is convincing yourself. Talking yourself into something. And again, this is where you need to be aware of fear, because there's a little bit of a difference of pushing through your fears and convincing yourself. Flip-flopping, so being like, yeah, I want this thing, and then like, no, and then like, yeah. So if you're really going back and forth on something, it's probably a no. Being rushed, being forced, being pressured, those are all red flags for this. Feeling really anxious about something, feeling frantic about something, feeling hopeless, or placing a lot of importance on something. Like, this is going to be the thing. If it's the right decision, it will be there for you in a few days. And if it's not, probably wasn't the right decision. It's okay. And not allowing yourself to express emotions. Emotions, especially if this is your authority, is such, expressing them is such a source of power for you. And if you're suppressing that, like, I don't know. The image that comes to mind is like, it's like you have like Google Maps or something, but you have half the screen covered and like you can't see actually where you're going. So if you're not allowing yourself to express your emotions, you're not really allowing a lot of your information to come through. So I want to touch on competing authorities. And I think there was a question about this before. So the solar plexus is always, it trumps everything, right? In the hierarchy, it is the authority. So if you have this defined, it's always what you want to do. With the sacral, what I like to think of is that you're still going to respond with the sacral, right? You're still going to get those like, or those movements towards something or away from something. And so I kind of think of it like if the wave, you know, is an ocean and the ocean's really loud, if it's really tumultuous, you can't really hear the sounds of the sacral. And that's not true because you can, but that's just the way that I like to think of it. And so it's like you need to let the ocean calm down to be able to clearly hear the sacral. And again, you're going to be able to actually connect with the sacral the entire time. Another way of relating the two is that as you go up and down on your wave, it is like so it's like it really should be a consistent answer throughout the wave, or a consistent response rather throughout the wave from the sacral. And if you have the spleen, you really kind of just gotta like, I don't know, almost treat it like a toddler in the car. You know, it doesn't get to make decisions. It's along for the ride. Thank you for pointing out all of these wonderful things, but we're not going to listen to you, really. Sorry. And the spleen does have a lot of great awareness to share. And yeah, some of you are saying you have all three of them. So really be wary, I would say, if you have all three, of spontaneous decisions. Because you have the sacral and the spleen that are both like, yeah, do it now, do it, let's go. And your emotional authority is like, no, please stop. So experiment. That's really all I'm ever going to say about anything, is experiment with it. You know, give yourself a week, give yourself a month where you're like, this month, I am going to wait. I'm going to check in with my emotional authority. The spleen and the sacral are kind of in like a timeout for the month. And then see what happens, you know, and if things are working out well for you using these, cool. But yeah, you've made a lot of bad decisions. And so one of the things that I like to do is sort of like a brain thing or whatever, is if you imagine a dial, like for volume, you know, turning volume up and down, when you can feel the sacral or the spleen being like, yeah, come on, do this now, do this now, do this now, and you have pressure, literally turn down the dial, like just mute it. Because that's not really what you're here to listen to. And it's a lot of noise and you don't need to pay attention to that. And Megan, I feel you so hard on that undefined root. I very much relate to that. It's a lot of pressure. Yeah, so I have a hard time feeling my sacral authority. The emotional wave is so overwhelming. Yep. All authorities plus an open root center. Yeah, that's a lot. And so again, especially if you have the open root center, there's a theme of pressure with the open root center. You especially want to listen to the wave. And again, I like to look at this from a place of experimentation, right? It's just try it out, see what happens. Give yourself a day, a week, a month, a year, whatever. See how it goes. And I promise you, like, I didn't get the emotional wave probably for a year. It probably took me a while because, I mean, for one, no one had explained it in a way that I could really understand it, let alone all of the other factors that go into it. But it wasn't really until I got super grounded in the shitty decisions, pardon my language, that I had made in my life that had led me nowhere good, that I was like, okay, this clearly isn't working. I'm not going to continue to do this. So that's kind of what I would say. All defined with my head and mind. So I always depending most on my intuition. Can my emotional center be combined with my intuition? Yeah, absolutely. Your intuition can fully work with your emotional center, but you still want to wait. So if you're getting intuition to like do something right now, And I mean, small in the moment things, cool, use your intuition. For bigger things, you know, have a conversation with your intuition and be like, okay, great, I hear you. I'm going to wait this out. Let me know if this is still the right thing for me tomorrow or the next day. That's what I would kind of say about that. Yeah, and like I said, experiment, experiment, experiment. Because you understanding what the emotional authority is in your body, in your experience, is the most important thing. And it will give you more strength to kind of quiet down the other voices, because you can really understand that the emotional authority is the one that's really clear. Human design talks about, in this whole evolution that happened in 1781, that it's kind of like our mind got to its maximum operating capacity. It was like at its zenith in that day and age. And so the mind often thinks, and this is true a little bit of the other authorities as well, that it knows everything. You know, it's like, I am the best horse and buggy driver in the world. I can ride a horse and buggy anywhere and everywhere, no problem. And you're like, cool, but I have a car right now. So you trying to ride a horse and buggy isn't actually helping me out. And it's kind of like that, where it's like the way that we've shifted to making decisions has changed. And it's not necessarily supernatural to us to wait or to respect this, but experiment with it, reflect on your past decisions, and even set an intention. Like, if you want to like pray or ask the universe or talk to your intuition or something, to be like, hey, I am really trying here to build a relationship with my emotional wave, and I'm finding this difficult. I don't want to respect it. I don't want to deal with the emotions. Help me, you know, help me be with them. Help me be okay with them. How do I deal with defined and everything but G, heart, solar plexus, spleen, and defined with dealing with emotions and waves? Kathy, I don't quite understand what you're asking. Defined and everything but G, heart, solar plexus, and spleen.
Yeah, everything is defined except for heart, G, solar plexus, and spleen for me. So just wondering how to deal with the waves of the emotions.
So you're taking in emotions for other people and amplifying them. So the best thing that you can do in terms of emotions is figure out ways to empty, you know, figure out ways to release emotions. And there's not a whole lot of difference, let's say, between processing emotions and releasing emotions. But what I often do with people in my life is, when they're upset with something, like let's say you're upset about your work, and I'm like, okay, Kathy, tell me about your work. And you're like, ah, you know, just like unloading. And I'm like, okay, what else about your work? And you continue to unload. I'm like, what else is there? You unload. And you'll get to a point where you're like, okay. And you're just fine, right? Because that energy isn't yours, but you're keeping it inside because you're acting like the sponge, right? And I'm not making you wrong for that, because we all do it, and we really haven't been taught how to work with this energy. And so it's allowing yourself to release it. Like I said, it's like you are an 18-year-old and you went to a party and you drank too much alcohol. You need to throw that up. You know, like, that's hurting you. You need to get it out of your body, instead of being like, no, I don't want to throw up. I'm just going to keep it inside. Like, well, it's going to kill you. So let it out, release it. It doesn't belong to you. It's not supposed to be there. Let it out. Danny, I'm completely open for the solar plexus, but my boyfriend has it defined. I would say he's pretty stable emotionally while I have bigger. Yeah. So Danny, what it is that you take in emotions and you amplify them. So often, yeah, exactly. Megan, the same thing. If you're undefined, you take in emotions and you amplify them. So you may have the experience of being more emotional than emotional people, especially if these emotional people are maybe not fully expressing their emotions. You kind of pick up those emotions and you make them bigger, and you like express the emotions for them. So some things to do, like I said, dealing with the releasing of the emotions, but also having conversations with these people. And I get that this isn't always a comfortable thing, but get really connected with them. What's going on with them emotionally? How are they really feeling? And I don't know what your boyfriend is like. I've certainly had relationships where people don't touch emotions with like a 100-foot pole, But if he's emotional, he's still experiencing things. And again, it depends on what wave he has, because some waves really aren't that crazy, and some are. So there might be emotions that you're picking up for them. There might be emotions that you're picking up from your friends. I strongly believe that you can pick things up from TV. So it's like, are you watching a lot of reality TV where there's all of this crazy drama? You might be taking on all of that crazy drama. So having a lot of time throughout your day, or a lot of awareness maybe is a better way of putting it, to release the emotions, to let them out. And it can be so easy. Like sometimes I imagine just like vacuuming myself, like, you know, not actually, but imagining that you're just energetically vacuuming all of the centers clean to get rid of all the stuff that's not yours. Or take a shower and imagine it all going down the drain. Or what I like to do this for pressure especially, but imagining, you know, like if you have like an instant pot or like a pressure cooker and you release the pressure valve and it's just like shh, and allowing that to release, because it's like, it's not yours. So I know these things might sound kind of silly, but they can be really helpful. Kathy, I would say probably a defined will center has a lot to do with narcissism, but there's a lot of things that can go into that. Yeah, I would probably say that. I would probably say like a defined will center connected to the throat or connected to the G, but I don't actually know if that's true, but that's just what I would imagine. So emotional attraction or emotional interaction. I think someone asked a question, which I think I'm going to get to about. We'll see. So the defined center radiates energy. The undefined or open centers amplify energy. So like I said, you are going to take in and amplify energy, or the people around you are going to amplify your energy. And often in relationships or in households or workspaces, there's some emotion, someone amplifies it, and it just keeps getting like amped up, because it's kind of like, I don't know, like a ping pong ball or something going back and forth, but it just keeps going higher and higher and higher. So when emotions are being amplified, especially when it's unproductive, physically take space. Go for a walk, go for a drive, go somewhere else in the house, get physical space, because your auras hold this energy, right? 15 minutes minimum to allow the energy to dissipate. And this is something that used to happen all the time when I was first with my boyfriend. We would get in these kind of like arguments or something, and it would feel like so shitty. And then I would go and leave to go home like later that night or the next day or something. And I'd get like halfway home, which is about 20 minutes. And I'd be like, oh, huh. And I'd like send him a message and be like, you know, sorry for blah, 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 but I see this differently. And I see what you were saying here. And like, blah, 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 I love you. And he's just like, what the hell is going on? Like, why were you here terrorizing me for the past 24 hours? And then you leave for 20 minutes and everything's fine. And, you know, since I learned about human design, I was like, that's exactly what's happening. You know, the emotional charge isn't there anymore. So it's like, I can see things clearly. I can think clearly. I can be in touch with myself instead of feeling like I'm a crazy person. Hold on, what was the question about? There was, oh, I've lost it. I should have written it down. We'll have a question at the end, so if I didn't answer something, we'll go back. So manifestation in the solar plexus. I want to briefly talk about this. The basic manifestation mechanics in human design essentially goes like this. Your mind stimulates emotions through thought. Your emotions tune the frequency of the G center and your magnetic field. And the magnetic monopole, which lives in the G center, its only job is to attracts everything in your life to you. So it's really that simple. And it's not simple at all because emotions are involved. So maintaining emotional well-being, which is the next thing we're going to talk about, is really helpful. And then using your thoughts as a way to stimulate emotion. And so, you know, engaging in possibility, wondering about things, being amazed at things, all the crazy, wonderful, cool things that could happen, as opposed to like how terrible and awful everything is. That's kind of the basics of how it works, but it really relies on the emotional frequency to tune the G center, to have it attract the things you want to be attracting. Emotional well-being. So learn to express your emotions. And if you're new to this, it can be a little bit dramatic for a while. I really didn't express my emotions well until, I don't know, I was 30 years old maybe. Um, so what I find tends to happen is kind of a similar process if you've had issues with food. So what tends to happen with food is if you restrict your eating for a really long time, you go off the rails and start binging, right? Because we can only restrict for so long and our bodies try to move us back into kind of like a homeostasis. So if you decide, okay, I'm going to try this intuitive eating thing, and I've been restricting food my whole life, you're probably going to go eat everything in sight for a little while. And then you'll come back to kind of an even place where you can eat foods that feel good. You don't feel crazy around food. Things are fine. And I find it's somewhat like that with emotions, where if you've really been restricting and holding in your emotions or not letting yourself experience emotions, that you can kind of go off the rails for a little bit, because it's almost like eating chocolate bars for every meal. Like it's almost indulgent in a sense to allow yourself to like have a breakdown or rage at someone or cry your eyes out when you haven't allowed yourself to do that your entire life or for a very long period. So if you go that path and are experiencing a lot of drama, it's just like there's a lot that needs to be allowed out. There's a lot that needs to be processed. And don't worry about, oh my God, I'm this crazy person now, I got to stuff it all back in, or whatever. Allow it. It's kind of like you need to purge some of this stuff and then you'll go back to like a more even space. So don't worry too much about that. Creating a safe environment to express emotions is really important. That's where, really good friends or partners or therapists even can come in handy. And same with finding an empathetic witness. And what I mean by that, it's like this concept of having someone that can just be there for you, that can just listen to you, that isn't going to try to fix you, that isn't going to try to, stop you or keep you small or get you to stop crying. They're just there to be there and to allow you to be. So that can be really helpful. Megan, yeah, totally. It is hard to find. And that's where therapists are, certainly have value. But what I would also say is that instead of trying to find an empathetic witness, create one. So find someone in your life that is you're close enough to that you can share things with and be like, hey, I just need to share this. I don't want you to give me advice. I don't want you to try to fix things. I just really need you to be there for me while I let this out. And Victoria, yeah, I think there's a lot of value to paying someone or to having a professional so that you're not kind of creating stuff with people in your life. And I don't know that I would look at it per se as like loading onto those close to you. But especially if you have a lot going on and if other people in your life have a lot going on, having a practitioner can be really helpful. Jamie, oh my gosh, I so relate to this. Yeah, I went through a really emotional period where I cried a lot, and it was probably about 6 months of maybe a little bit more before I sort of got it out of my system. And I wouldn't say that you need to manage your emotional center better, because I would imagine you're probably just going through something or you're going through a purge. Like, let's remember, we're in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of stuff going on. Having emotions isn't a bad thing. And what you might want to do is note some of the things of these emotional well-being and start using more of those. So emotions are energy. Crying is one way of processing the energy. Journaling is another way. Exercising is another way. I like to just like kind of like shake, and like move like all over the place and just like get the energy out, like shaking or dancing, and not like choreographed dancing, but just like kind of bouncing to get the energy out is really helpful. So there's a lot of ways that you can process the energy and process the emotions that doesn't necessarily have to be crying. And I think crying is a really valid way to process emotions. But that's something that you might want to look into, just so it's not always that one thing, and you have other outlets for the energy. Yeah, Kundalini is awesome as well. You're moving the energy through your solar plexus and stuff can be really helpful. So yeah, finding an empathetic witness, notice what meaning you're creating in the sense of like, are you making it bad that you're crying a lot? Rewriting past experiences. So especially if you have gates 44 or 13, they're all about the past. If there's things in the past that are still really painful for you or didn't go how you want, you can literally rewrite them. I do that a lot and it's helpful. And if you have more questions about that, I can get into that towards the end. And yeah, dealing with your life. So your past, your life, intentionally creating your future, all of those go into your emotional well-being instead of like being a victim to just whatever life is throwing your way. Also, I'm going to throw out gate 10. If anyone has gate 10 in your chart, I do. It's a gate of self-love, but it can also really easily move into a victim mode. So just notice that. I'm going to pass on the logic and sensing circuit right now because we're running over time. So like I said, my favorite practice is journaling. I really like rage journaling is what I call it. You know, I'm a manifester, got to get that anger out. So what I will do is turn the Wi-Fi off on my laptop. I will open up a document just so I don't accidentally send it to anyone and literally just rage. And sometimes my rage journaling is like bullshit, 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 bullshit. Like it's just whatever. And it's something I wouldn't necessarily say to someone else and I wouldn't want someone else to see, but it's just like, I just need this out. And once I feel like it's out, I'm like, okay, what else? And there's usually a little bit more and I'll ask myself that a couple times. And then I'm just like, oh, okay, like the anger's gone. I feel good. So yeah, if you're Jamie, like you're saying you're crying all the time, try that because it's like, listen, I cry a lot and I'm okay with that. But if it's something that you're not comfortable with, try different things. EFT, that's a tool I use with my clients a lot. It's also called emotional freedom technique or tapping. YouTube it if you don't know what that is because there's lots of videos on YouTube about it. And like I said, movement, dancing, shaking, boxing, running, all of those things. Drink water. Emotions are energy and water helps electrical impulses and energy to transmit. And my teacher told me this a while ago, and I kid you not, the more hydrated I am, the less bad days I have, right? The more energy I have, the quicker I can process emotions. They don't seem to stagnate for as long. So drink water. Yeah, Victoria, totally. It makes sense, right? And then uterus owners, which I think is most of us on this call, although I won't make any assumptions, consider paying attention to cycle syncing. And if you don't know what that is, there's a really great book called In the Flow by Elisa Vitti. And my friend Vianney, her Instagram is at statusflow.co. She has lots of information about it as well, because we have hormones that operate differently than men, and our hormones are going to create different experiences for us. And so you might think you have really bad issues with your emotions when actually maybe your hormones are just off a little bit. And if you can eat in a different way to support them or exercise in a way to support your hormones, then you won't really experience these insane problems. Yeah, The Flow is amazing, right? Yeah, I love that book. I love the idea of a rage journal, and then maybe you can rip up the pages and burn them. Yeah, totally. Personally, I find that rage is too fast of an emotion for me to handwrite, but I love the idea of that if that's something that feels good in terms of like physically writing. The gates being conscious or unconscious affect the way someone shows their emotional waves. So when you have something that's conscious, I like this analogy for it, that conscious weight or conscious channels are like roads. So if you're flying overhead, you can see a road, whereas unconscious or red ones are tunnels. So you can't see them. You're not as aware of them. They're still there. There's still energy moving through it, but you don't necessarily have the same awareness. And so it's going to be similar, where if you have it consciously, you might be like, oh yeah, my emotions, whew, like they're intense, right? Where if it's unconsciously, you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not emotional. And the people in your life are like, yeah, you are. Like, it's that kind of a thing. So if you have the channels unconsciously, it might be a good practice, although you might want to like prepare yourself a little bit to have conversations with people in your life and just be like, hey, I learned about this thing. Do you find I'm an emotional person? Or like, where do you find my emotions come up the most? See what kind of feedback you get. Another resource I really love that healed a lot for me, although it's a long book, is The Great Pain Deception. And it's based on the work of Dr. Sarno, which basically says that we hold emotions in our body. And there's some sort of a quote in the book that I forgot to write down, but the idea is that it's safer for us to have back pain, to have stomach problems, to have allergies, to have disease, than it is to express our emotions. And that concept, honest to God, changed my life because it is so true. Even it's funny, as a manifestor, you know, with the whole anger thing being the not self emotion, I was like, I don't know what they're talking about. I'm not angry. I'm never angry. I'm like, I've never been angry in my life. I just like don't even know what anger's like. Like, meh, I don't know what they're talking about. Crazy. And then I was reading this book and it talked about anger being like an undercurrent of rage. And I was like, oh, yeah, I have some of that. And I've been having some of that, I think, my whole life. And I've just never really let it out, which is probably why I have like debilitating stomach problems and all of this pain in my body. So once I dealt with that, it's like, you know, a lot of my problems went away. Really, all of them did. Like, I don't have the issues that I used to have at all in terms of physical problems because I express my emotions now. I'm not trying to contain them. Martin Brofman, Inner Cause. Okay, cool. Interesting. I'm gonna make a note of that somewhere. Yeah, so emotional energy is energy. So we need to find ways to use the energy if you can feel it building, right? So going back to the comment that, I can't remember who it was, made it about crying all the time, Jamie, I think it was, find ways to deal with your energy before it's like you bursting out crying. And again, there's nothing wrong with crying, but this is if you're kind of like, I'm tired of it, my eyes are puffy all the time, my nose is stuffed up, I don't want to keep crying. I get it, I've been there. So I actually went through a phase where it was like when I cried, I had like an allergic reaction or something to my like own tears, and my eyes would get like so, oh my God, it's so gross. They would get like scabby and so puffy and they would like almost swell shut. I think I was like, I don't know, releasing some kind of shit. I'm not sure. Anyway, so yes, we talked about this a little bit. So unhealthy relationships with emotions. Using your mind to engage with possibility, oh, I spelled that wrong, in terms of manifestation is important. Creating higher frequencies is important. It does not mean high vibe only or ignore the low frequencies. You're going to feel both. If you've been restricting your emotions, you might experience kind of like a binge of releasing emotions, let's say. And not using your emotional authority can be a really big cause in the emotional turmoil in your life, right? One of the themes of the emotional center is like leaping into chaos, essentially. If you're not taking time to wait, that can really create more emotional problems in your life. And then it's a lot harder for you to deal with those. So create a safe space for your emotions to be, for you to experience them. And it's a practice, you know, you don't need to completely change everything overnight, but the more that you can be in touch with your emotions, in touch with your body, the easier it is to connect with your emotional authority and then live in a life that's really aligned. Okay, so thank you. Do we have any questions that I didn't get to? Thank you so much all for staying with me here. I know this went a little bit longer. Sometimes I talk a lot. Can you talk about what the experience is of understanding your sacral? Yeah, a little bit. So in terms of your sacral, if you have the sacral defined, you get a guttural yes or no answer. So it usually is something like uh-huh or uh-uh. And depending on your chart, you might experience more of a movement. So like a movement towards something or a movement away from something. So paying attention to that. And then when you have the sacral and the emotional solar plexus, it's allowing the response of the sacral while you're also waiting out your emotional wave. Yes, so hold on. I just want to, for anyone who wants to jump off, I wanted to let you know that I do have some discounts for you. If you love this and you have an interest in continuing this, and I will get to the questions afterwards, but just in case some of you have to leave, if you want to book a reading, that's certainly one way to work with me. If you are interested in just learning more about your chart, how everything pertains to you specifically, I'm offering you 33% off. If you're interested in coaching, which is usually a 10-week session, I'm going to add on 2 extra sessions for anyone that's on this call, because why not, you know, give you guys some extra goodness, especially if you have that emotional authority. It can take a little bit more time to build that relationship with it. And if you want to learn human design in depth, I do have an early bird offer. If you want to get on my wait list, I am going to be teaching human design next month. So if you're interested in any of these things, you can head to sortofspiritual.com/ESP, and all of the links for the stuff is there. So I just wanted to put that out there before you guys are running off, because I know this has gone on quite long. So Christine, I'm so happy you feel like you learned so much. Yeah, so rewriting past memories. So this is what I was going to talk about a little bit with the logic circuit and the sensing circuit. Logic says X happened in the past, so that means Y is going to happen in the future. You know, I did this thing, so now I have to do that thing. This is what my past is, so this is what my future is. And logically, we look at things and think, when, you know, I went to school to be a nurse, so now I'm going to be a nurse for the rest of my life. When really the two have nothing to do with each other. You went to school to be a nurse, and maybe you're going to become an actress. Who knows? But logic is, I did this, so now I'm going to do that. And logic is really limiting, and it's also over prized. I don't know, that's not the word I want to use, but whatever. Overemphasized maybe in our society, of like, logic is the way to go. Logic is what makes sense. Logic is what's important. And sure, logic has its uses, but it's also very limiting. And so what often happens with the whole rewriting of past memories is that our past memories, or rather our story of the past memories, limit us. And so I'll give you an example of one that I did myself that really changed a lot for me, especially when it came to crying, actually. I used to cry all the time, and I did this, and it just kind of like, I mean, I still cry a lot, probably compared to the average person, but that's fine. So I had this experience of myself as a 5-year-old, and this memory, in my bed at nighttime, like crying, like screaming, crying. I was crying so loud. And I knew my parents could hear me, because I was like intentionally like really screaming, crying. Like everyone on the block could probably hear me. And my parents didn't come. And I mean, I was probably crying for like, honestly, 5 minutes, but it felt like eternity. And I was so upset that they didn't come. I was so heartbroken. I felt betrayed. I felt neglected. I felt alone. You know, as a 5-year-old, I made up all these stories about what happened, right? And I felt like one of the big stories I made up from that was that I'm a burden, right? My emotions are a burden. People don't like my emotions. They don't want to be around my emotions. And I'm going to be alone. So it's like, I need to keep those inside, right? This is a 5-year-old making up a story. It's what we all do. And so what I did is I went back and rewrote that. And like, honestly, if anyone read the stories that I rewrote, they would be like, what is wrong with this woman? And that's okay. Because I really write them in like a cheesy way, where I'll be like, once upon a time, there was a girl named Katie, and she blah, 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 blah. And so basically I thought to myself, okay, so that's one perspective, right? One perspective is that I'm a burden. One perspective is that no one wants to deal with my emotions, that I'm alone, that I'm abandoned, that no one cares. That's one perspective. Another perspective, and whether it's true or not, is completely irrelevant. But another perspective is, maybe my parents knew that I was a really independent child, because I was, and they knew that it was going to be helpful for me to develop the skills of learning to self-soothe, learning to calm myself down, you know, not relying on someone else to come and save me. And so for all I know, they were right outside my door crying themselves because they were so heartbroken hearing me cry. But they decided, for my best interest, to not come in and comfort me, to let me fall asleep. And I was actually only crying for like a minute and a half, and then I fell asleep. So it's like everything was good. You know, and then once I fell asleep, they came and looked in the door, and they saw that I was all good. My mom cried to my dad because she felt so bad about doing that, because they love me so much. And then whatever, everything was over and our lives continued, right? And so one story has me feeling awful and like I'm a burden and everything. And the other story is like, oh yeah, wow, my parents, like that must have been really hard for them. But they really wanted my best interest. And like, now I'm really strong and I'm really able to take care of myself. And like, that was really nice of them to do that, because I learned this, whatever. Is one any more true than the other? Who knows? But one is a lot more useful to me in my life right now, right? One leaves me feeling empowered and maybe not validated, but in control, let's say, where one leaves me feeling awful. And we make our decisions in life based on the stories that we've told ourselves in the past. So if I've been telling myself for the past 25 years that I'm a burden and my emotions are bad, then I'm not going to let my emotions out. And we've already discussed why that's a problem, right? Whereas if I can see my emotions as something powerful and something that I can process on my own, and sure, it's great to have help, and I get a lot of support in my life when I need it, but it's looking at something and seeing it a different way and retelling the story, because stories get around that logic. So that was kind of what I was talking about with the logic circuit. So the logic circuit is one part, but storytelling lives in the sensing circuit. And the sensing circuit circumvents that logic. So it creates new possibilities. So instead of having this, I'm a burden, everything is awful, and building my future on that platform, I can build a future on any platform that I create. You can really go back and retell any memory. I have another one of like when I was, 13 or something, and I was getting bullied, and it was like all these kids in my middle school were surrounding me and like yelling at me, and it was terrifying as a child, right? But when I think about that now, instead of like this awful feeling and feeling so scared, I imagine or I've like rewritten it to imagine. Do you guys know if there's an Indian festival called Holi, I think, where they have these like powdered paints and they throw them at each other, and it's like this beautiful explosion of like amazingness. So I imagine that. So it's like when I think back to that, I'm not like, oh my God, that experience of being bullied was so awful. It's like, no, it's actually the beginning of a giant party. Is that true? God, no. That 100% did not happen. But I don't have this like fear of that anymore. And if there's still a lot of an emotional charge around something, I recommend using tapping or something like that to help process the emotion first, because you don't want to lie to yourself, but you do want to create a different story. And there's a subtle difference between that. But if it's something is still like an open wound for you, if it's something that there's still a charge around, you want to do something else to process that before you go and rewrite it. But yeah, you can literally rewrite anything. And like, even with, I'm divorced. And so I rewrote the story of moving in with my ex-husband, which did not go well, at the beginning of quarantine, because I moved in with my boyfriend and I was being a freaking weirdo and being like super defensive and causing all these problems. And so I was like, you know what, let me just rewrite the story of how it went and how I wanted it to go and like how great this would have been. And then a couple days later, my boyfriend was like, you're being really nice to me. Like, not like you're not normally nice, but you're being like really nice and like so loving. And I'm like, yeah, well, because I don't feel like I have to protect myself from my ex-husband anymore, so I'm not bringing that into this relationship because I'm now, I don't know, it's a weird way that it works, but it's one of the tools that I give to pretty much all of my clients. And it always seems that like that's the one that they're like voice noting me about, being like, oh my God, this thing is crazy. Like I rewrote this story and then this thing happened at work. And like, so I, give it a try. And if you have some cool experiences with it, send me a DM on Instagram or send me an email or something, and I'd love to hear about it. Yeah, so that's that. And Megan, I'm sorry that your mom used to do that. I know that a lot of humans aren't great at validating the feelings of others. Can you touch on integration? Integration isn't really circuitry per se. It's really just a collection of channels. So what do you want to like know about it specifically? Anyone else have any questions before we finish up? Thank you all so much. Can you touch on the integration? I have it in my chart. Yeah, I would definitely recommend booking a reading because there's a lot to be said about integration and the circuits in general and the channels and all of that. Michelle, thank you so much for your time. I know I'm chatty and I've been going on for a while, but I hope you found some value in this and that you understand your wave better, or you understand those in your life better. That was my intention, so I hope that it came across. Awesome. Thank you all so much. And yeah, if you have any follow-up questions, send me an email. Come find me on Instagram. I'm at Sort of Spiritual. Yeah, if you have any feedback or anything like that. Why some people with emotional authority seem super emotional and others don't. Their emotional wave, I would say. Yeah, Danny, people have different waves. And like I said, even the individual wave, which sometimes can be really extreme and sometimes it's not, I would say it's how adept they are at expressing their emotions and not letting them build up and managing kind of themselves, and not in a suppressive way, but just in a way of like knowing how to do that, you know? Like, why do some people eat a lot of food to the point of ruining their health and some people don't, right? It's kind of a similar thing. Some people are really good at managing themselves, and some people restrict in an unhealthy way, and some people can just eat food in a healthy way, right? It's kind of a similar concept. Loved all the tools. We'll definitely integrate to observe. Awesome. Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm so happy that you were all here. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for allowing me to live out my conscious sun in gate 45 and sharing all the resources with you. And I will be offering more of these soon, so keep an eye out for that. Yeah, thank you so much, and have a good afternoon or evening or morning or wherever you are in the world. Thanks, guys. Bye.